Hello, I'm Malcolm. Welcome to the 1949th edition of the Enfield Talking newspaper. With me on the reading team for Thursday the 10th of April 2014 are Elizabeth, Katherine and John, with Dave on the controls. And the items we'll be reading are the copyright of our local newspapers, the Enfield Gazette and Advertiser and the Enfield Independent. This week's local stories include a councillor calls for numbers to be cut to provide better value, pilot mental health scheme launched, look who's back, this is about a trio of Tories, and noisy neighbours will shatter our tranquil surroundings. But before we go to the papers, we've just got a reminder. Elizabeth.
This is just a reminder that there won't be a tape next week due to the Easter holidays, and the next edition will be number 1950, and the dateline of that will be the 24th of April 2013.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Now, I'm sure you know by now that you have a listener's representative, Diane de Jersey, who will be happy to help you with any problems or concerns you have about your talking newspaper. You can call Diane on 020-8805-6578. That's 020-8805-6578. And now here's Katherine with the first news item.
3 Tory councillors who last week threw in the towel for the upcoming local elections have performed a U-turn. Last week, the Advertiser reported that Winchmore Hill Ward councillors Ertan Hura and Elaine Hayward had walked out of the Enfield Southgate Conservative Association annual meeting alongside Mrs Hayward's husband Robert, a ward councillor for Southgate. All 3 publicly resigned their candidacies for May's elections and resigned from the association. Now, this paper can exclusively reveal that the trio are hoping to put that spat behind them and throw their hats back into the ring for the elections on Thursday, May the 22nd. After meeting the trio, Anne Evans, the association's newly elected chairwoman, issued a statement which said, "All families have their disagreements, and Enfield Southgate Conservatives are no different. I am very pleased that these differences have been sorted out and that Elaine Hayward, Robert Hayward and Ertan Hura are more than happy to continue in their roles of serving the community as they have in the past. The Conservative Association is most grateful for their dedication to the constituencies over a number of years." Although Ms Evans has welcomed the councillors back into the fold, Daniel Pearce, the association's treasurer, and a councillor in the same ward as Mr Hayward, said that their candidacies would not be formally confirmed until an executive meeting, when the chairmen and women for each ward in Enfield Southgate will make the final decision on who should represent the party at the elections. He said, "We want the best councillors to represent the public, and on Wednesday evening the final decision will be made in a discussion involving everyone." He added that the conduct of all 3 councillors at last week's AGM would be discussed at that meeting.
Plans to open an international language school in Cockfosters will go ahead despite growing opposition from those who live nearby. A former Benedictine monastery in Bramley Road will become a new residential school for international students after it was agreed at an Enfield Borough Council meeting on Monday. However, the decision has gone against a barrage of complaints from campaigners who suggest that the council has not been able to gauge the noise levels it will create. In total, 149 signatures were collected against the proposal, as opposed to the 70 initially stated on the planning report. The calm and sedate surroundings previously enjoyed by the resident monks will be shattered, according to Albert Squires of Bramley Road. He said, "There is no way the council has been able to conduct a full noise survey that would properly represent what it would be like if you had all those children running around. Our tranquil surroundings will be shattered by our incoming noisy neighbours." Wendy Smith of Bramley Road spoke out at the meeting and claimed that there had been a lack of transparency in the noise surveys and was also concerned about the existing cemetery which is on the ground of the monastery. The school will be owned by Liberi di Educare, a language school based in Italy that specialises in providing English tuition to students ranging from 10 years up to school leaving age. Those attending the school will be allowed outside until 9 p.m, with a maximum of 80 students attending. there will be up to 44 resident students between 10 and 18 years old. Rob Smith, who represents the company, said that it is a non-profit organisation and that those staying at the site would be there no longer than a calendar month, and he hoped the new school would be good neighbours with residents. Mr. Smith also said that he did not expect the maximum quota of 44 resident pupils staying at any one time to be fulfilled. Planning committee members agreed to pass the proposals, but Councillor Erton Hura suggested that extra landscaping be considered when the monastery becomes the school. Councillor Lionel Zeta, who represents Cockfosters Ward, expressed his concerns about the new development. He said, "This is a very significant change which local residents oppose. There is a world of difference between a small group of monks quietly going about their devotions and a larger and undoubtedly much noisier group of students." The building was purpose-built as a monastery in the 1990s and associated to the adjacent Church of Christ the King. At its peak, up to 18 monks would have occupied the building at any one time, but this number has now been greatly reduced following the owner's decision to sell the site.
An Enfield Borough Councillor has called for the number of councillors at the authority to be cut by a third. Councillor Tom Waterhouse told fellow councillors that as whip for the Conservative group, he feels the current number of representatives does not provide good value to the public. He said, "Being whip for the Conservative group for the past 4 years has meant it's been my job to monitor contributions and attendance rates of all councillors. Doing this has led me to be firmly of the view that we could cut the number of councillors by a third and not harm the level of service we provide to residents." He also pointed out that the average attendance of Enfield councillors at meetings was 82%. He also said that the average for the bottom third of the attendance table is 69%, which he described as not good enough.
Mental health teams will be placed in police stations and courts to help cut reoffending. The pilot scheme was launched by Barnet Haringey and Enfield Mental Health Trust. It's hoped the project will cater for the high number of people in the criminal justice system who are suffering from mental health problems. Lord Victor Adebololi, Chairman of Independent Commission on Mental Health and Policing, said, "The high rates of mental health issues among prisoners suggest that the prison service has become a catch-all social and mental health care service, as well as a breeding ground for poor mental health. I welcome the pilot, as the research has shown that investing in diversion now will make huge financial savings in the long term. Doctors and police hope the scheme will reduce the burden on the criminal justice system. It'll allow vulnerable adults with suspected mental health issues, learning disabilities, and substance misuse problems to be assessed and referred for treatment." Maria Kane, CEO of Barnet, Enfield and Haringey Mental Health National Health Trust, said that we're delighted that North East London has been chosen to pilot this very worthy programme.
A man forced to sleep rough with his 2 pet dogs as the council could not house him with his animals is still living on the streets despite the death of both animals last month. Andy Reader was featured in this paper in November last year after we learned that the 43-year-old, who suffers from a litany of health problems, had been sleeping rough in the borough because the local authority would not house him and his pets. Mr. Reader was forced out of his flat last year after the housing benefit cap left him unable to afford his landlord's steep rent hike. When he originally approached the authority after his eviction, it said that if he wanted a council house, he would have to give up his beloved pets, Jilly and Buster. Now Mr. Reader has revealed Buster died on March the 3rd after being run over by a car. 10 days later, Jilly died after vets discovered she was suffering from an advanced form of cancer. The council originally said that I couldn't get a house because of the dogs, but now it's just me. My solicitor told me they still don't have a duty to house me, he said. Mr. Reader admitted he had been left devastated by the loss of both pets in such a short space of time. When the Advertiser contacted the council, a spokesman said, "Enfield Council and a specialist housing service have been in contact with Mr. Reader and offered him support and assistance." The council's cabinet member for housing, Ahmet Oykene, added, Now that the council is aware of the change in his circumstances, we hope Mr. Reader feels ready to engage with specialist housing services to work towards resolving his situation.
An Enfield school pupil who was deported from the UK has been taken into safety following her arrival in Mauritius. Yashika Bagherati's dramatic battle against deportation came to an end last Wednesday when she was escorted onto an Air Mauritius plane to be flown to the country that evening. The 19-year-old fled the country with her mother and her sisters in 2011, fearing for their safety from a family member. Her former school, Oasis Academy Hadley, who led the campaign to stop Yashika being deported, told the Enfield Independent that she had been taken into safety from the airport when she landed. The spokesman for the school said, "We were contacted by people in Mauritius who have taken her to safety. We cannot disclose where she has gone, but the fact that people have been willing to help in Mauritius shows how big an impact the campaign has had." Students of the academy fought tirelessly to stop their friend being taken away before completing her A-level exams in 2 months' time. A late bid at the High Court last Tuesday was also rejected. Ms. Bagherati pleaded with a select committee to help save her child from deportation. When the committee questioned Immigration Minister James Brockenshire on the deportation, he said that the Home Secretary, Theresa May, should not intervene in Yashika's case and that there was no justification to do so.
An outspoken former councillor credited with delivering 2 big housing developments in the borough has died. Richard Corse, who was 74, served as a Labour councillor between 1986 and 1998, a period during which he rose to become deputy leader of Enfield Council and drove through the Enfield Island Village housing development in Enfield Lock and the Highlands development in Winchmore Hill. First elected to represent the then Arnos Ward in 1986, Mr. Corse was re-elected in 1990 and 1994. He stood in the 1987 general election in the Enfield Southgate constituency and came third as Conservative MP Michael Portillo retained the seat. He was outspoken and opinionated. You either liked him or not, said Andrew Stafford, Cabinet Member for Finance and Property. He was far from politically correct, but he was incredibly loyal to those he supported and got things done. The developments were difficult to get through, but he felt we needed the homes, and he did it. Born in Osage Lane, East Barnet, Mr. Corse moved to the borough in 1972 when he bought a house in Enfield Road, where he was living at the time of his death with his only child, Caroline, 35, her husband, Adam Ward, and their 3-year-old daughter, Ellie. He worked as a minicab driver at Station Cars in Southbury Road, Enfield, and at Enterprise Enfield, managing the business units at the agency's centre in Queensway, Ponders End. Council leader Doug Taylor said Richard was a big personality councillor and a dedicated advocate for local residents. He left his mark on the borough, and it is with great sadness that I note his passing. John Egan, who served as the Conservative councillor from 1990 and 1994 and between 1998 and 2006, said he always spoke his mind and he was a character who used to upset everybody. But he was genuine and he truly believed in the things he said. Mr. Corse, whose family said he had suffered blood clots and died of kidney failure, lost his wife Teresa to cancer in 1990. Daughter Caroline said, "My dad lived a very colourful life and would constantly get himself in trouble. For me, he played the role of mum and dad. He brought me up alone, and I cannot thank him enough."
1 in 7 council tenants affected by the government's controversial bedroom tax has fallen into rent arrears since the policy was introduced a year ago, new figures have revealed. The policy, officially called the Spare Room Subsidy, came into force in April 2013, and currently 1,345 households who receive housing benefit and are renting from Enfield Council or a housing association have been hit with a 14% cut in the allowance if they have a spare bedroom, rising to 25% for those with 2 or more additional bedrooms. The government has said the policy should encourage people on housing benefit to move to smaller properties, freeing up homes for people in need. But figures obtained from the council show that out of the 704 affected tenants, 116 have fallen into rent arrears, owing the authority an average of £230, while just 21 households have managed to downsize through the council's mutual exchange scheme. Ahmet Okan'a, Enfield's cabinet member for housing, called for the policy to be scrapped. The bedroom tax is hurting people. It wasn't properly thought through, and we need to get rid of it, he said. We need to increase employment opportunities as opposed to just punishing people on benefits. Since September, 115 households have moved to alternative accommodation or found work and are no longer in need of housing benefit. Mr. O'Kenna said, "Through the Council's Welfare Reform Task Force, we work with the Job Centre and those affected to find solutions. But we're not really resolving the issues, we're just lessening the impact." Shadow Cabinet Member for Housing, Edward Smith, defended the policy. "It makes sense in places like London, where there's such a shortage of social housing," he said. "It's one of the few ways in which we can tackle overcrowding. I know it can be painful for households, but I support the policy as far as Enfield is concerned." Struggling tenants can apply to the council for help by claiming discretionary housing payments.
Thieves made off with thousands of pounds worth of potentially lethal drugs from a van in Edmonton last week. A van parked outside a chemist in 4 Street, Upper Edmonton, was raided at 5:35 p.m. last Wednesday, and 6 plastic boxes stacked with pre-filled syringes of the arthritis drug Enbrel stolen. Police officers are warning that the drug could kill instantly if injected, as it has been removed from its temperature-controlled environment. They say the thieves made off with £151,000 worth of the drug and are collating CCTV footage from the area. Acting Detective Sergeant Stuart Miller of Enfield Police said, "We are no longer appealing for information about the white transit van. However, the drugs are still outstanding, and I wish to take the opportunity to appeal again to any who may have seen someone acting suspiciously outside the pharmacy at the time the boxes were stolen, or to any who may have been offered the drugs to contact the police. Anyone with information about the whereabouts of the drug is asked to call the police non-emergency line on 101 or Crime Stoppers anonymously on 0800 555 111.
The first war memorial in almost 70 years will be built in Enfield. The new stone memorial in St Michael's Green, Enfield Chase, will honour all those in the borough who have lost their lives fighting for their country since the end of the Second World War. The £15,000 memorial will also coincide with the commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the First World War in 1914 and is set to be ready for Remembrance Day on November the 11th. Enfield Borough Council's Cabinet Member for Environment, Councillor Chris Bond, said, "I am delighted Enfield Council has been able to find a suitable location for this war memorial so we can erect a permanent and proper monument to the members of the armed forces who gave their lives in service to their country since the Second World War. Not only will this memorial recognise their sacrifice, but in the tragic event of Enfield losing any more of its sons or daughters in foreign fields in the years to come, it means we will be able to mark their sacrifice and provide a lasting reminder to their heroism and sacrifice. Anyone who has lost a loved one and wants his or her name inscribed on the memorial should call 020 8379 2724. That's 020 8379 2724.
Clocking up more than 200 years of firefighting experience between them, 7 firefighters announced their retirements from Enfield Fire Station. The final roll call last Monday morning brought to an end the careers of 7 workers at Enfield Fire Station in Carterhatch Lane, Enfield. Station manager Jim Veers and his colleagues Kevin Kent, Dick Barnes, Steve Pyle, Ian Rapley, Paul Carey and John Cobbold said goodbye to their fire engines, drills and the adrenaline rush. Mr. Veers, 54, said he would miss working together with such a close-knit team. He said, "We feel like one big family in this team, and that's one of the most important parts of being in the fire brigade. It's a good station to work at, and I'm glad a few of us are going out together." Manager at the station for 8 years, Jim has overseen many different events and recalls the London riots of 2011 as one of the biggest jobs he had to do. He said, "I remember the Sony Centre burning during the London riots. That was a big fire, but in general we're kept very busy." Mr. Kent, who's completed 32 years at the service, admits he'll find it difficult leaving the fire brigade. He said, "We're always kept on our toes, and you never lose the buzz of doing the job. Watching the youngsters come through, I know the station is in good hands."
A nursery owner is rejoicing after she was granted permission for children to play outdoors. The nursery on the green in Chaseside, Enfield, was on the brink of losing outside playtime for its pupils 6 months ago after complaints about noise. But the nursery worked with neighbours and has been given planning permission to use its garden. Nursery owner Kay Wildman was overjoyed by the result. She said, "I feel like I've won the lottery after hearing this news. It's been something that has always been a niggle at the back of my mind, but now a huge weight has been lifted." A maximum of 9 children at a time will be allowed out in the garden for an hour and a half in the morning and again in the evening. Initially due for approval in 2012, the nursery at the time was given a temporary licence for a year. It was then due to be refused in September 2013, but was given a reprieve and a 6-month temporary licence. She added, "It's been a hard struggle and something that hasn't been off my mind. I've been instrumental in making sure that we have liaised with locals and worked with local councillors to try and get our licence granted." An Enfield Council Planning Committee report suggested 12 complaints were made. One suggestion read, "The continued use of the garden will result in noise, nuisance to adjoining residential gardens and carry through open windows of residential and commercial properties." But the committee voted unanimously in favour of the nursery on Monday. Mrs. Wildman will be hoping for a double success when judges from the National Day Nursery Association visit next week to decide if the nursery should be shortlisted for a national award. She said, "We hope for a second success, and I fear that we wouldn't have stood a chance of winning if we hadn't been allowed to use the garden. I've woken up today with a big smile on my face, and I want to thank everyone who has supported us."
A popular Scout leader will represent the UK at the World Scout Jamboree in Japan. Inderjeet Singh Rathore, known as Sunny, and a member of the 4th Enfield Scouts, will help to support the 36 young people selected from North London to travel to Japan in 2015. Sunny said, "Going to Japan will be a life-changing experience for me. To go as part of Scouting is a great privilege. I'm really excited to meet other Scouts and build long-lasting memories. I want to thank everyone who has supported me and who will support me at the beginning of my journey." Chief Scout Bear Grylls said, "Congratulations to Sunny and all the other UK volunteers who have been selected to lead Scouts at the Jamboree in Japan from North London. While lots of people know that Scouting is all about adventure, they often don't realise that adult volunteers get to do just as much as our young members through their involvement."
A new scheme to try to cut unemployment and bring more people into apprenticeships has been launched by Enfield Borough Council. The Employment and Skills Strategy will tackle unemployment and encourage local businesses to take on more apprentices. Council leader, Councillor Doug Taylor, said, "Well-trained, motivated and dedicated staff are the lifeblood of any organisation, and this strategy aims to ensure that we create the right conditions to produce a high-class workforce to enable our businesses to deal with the challenges of the 21st century. We need to match our residents' skills to the needs of businesses in our borough so we can reduce unemployment, tackle deprivation and lift people out of poverty." The council hopes the Garden Enfield project will create 1,200 jobs, and the £1.5 billion Meridian water development would create at least 3,000 jobs, both easing unemployment pressures in the borough.
Well, we've come to the end of side 1, so please stop your machine, take out the cassette, turn it over, and start side 2.